Hey, all right. Happy Friday. Hope you're having a decent Friday, or even gonna have a decent weekend at that. So, just to kind of rebrief from my previous weekend. Hey, uh, family and I we went to traditional Latin mass this last weekend, and it was great. Wasn't expecting people to like come up to us and kind of introduce themselves, but we had one of the ushers come up to us like right before kind of mass began, and was like, "Hey, you guys been here before?" Like, we have not. Good day, good day. And we're like, "No, we haven't." So he gave us, they're not missals, but they're like, books to follow along with the traditional Latin mass. And he's like, "Yeah, there's also families that get together at the end, like outside. So feel free to join us." So it was really nice, really welcoming. I wasn't expecting that. So that's my story. Anyways, I know I'm a little bit over time here. I don't know. I'm hoping I can hear Marilis here in a second. I'm going to join, but I have a different mic because the other one wasn't working anymore. So I may have to just yank this thing off based on that. So we'll give it a shot. So all right. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully I can hear. Okay. There we go. Okay, I can hear you. Perfect.
Hi.
Can you hear me too?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Nice. Well,
How are
hey,
you? First TLM mass.
it was great. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it was kind of nerve wracking in a bit because of our 2 year old.
Oh,
The funny part is though, at the times when the priest would say Amen or Amen, and everybody would say Amen after that, she would wait a beat, and then she would yell Amen.
I
So
love it.
it was great.
I love it. I love hearing the little kids at mass.
Yes. And I can't tell you how often we've gotten dirty looks from like other types of, ordinary mass parishes from
I
like,
know that happened. That happened to me. It was when it was before Easter, before Holy Week. I went to mass with my nephew, who's gonna be 2 at the end of May,
oh, nice.
and he was, being a 2-year-old, and a woman said to me, she was like, "Can't you quiet him down?" And I was like, "This is life of the church, right before your eyes happening. This is the life of the church."
It's like, I think people think it's all about them. And so if they can't
I
hear the homily, then it's ruined or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you've experienced that. I really feel for parents. When I see them struggling at mass, I just like try to smile really big.
And that goes so far. Like, I didn't like that before I had a child. Like, there was a time where I'm like, really, like, you can't take your kid out. But now, being a parent, like, when
Hmm.
people smile, I'm like, thank you. I know you get it. You get it.
Yes, like get rid of those cry rooms or whatever. Like let your kid just be.
Yes, I think we should keep the cry rooms and then send those grumpy old people into the cry rooms to try it out. That's that's me. Anyway, so yeah, just if you're popping on here, this is just a conversation on talking about how we can bring reverence back. I'm having different people hop on, really to get their unique perspective, and we have none other. That was a horrible pun. None other than an ex-nun on the run, Marilis.
Hi.
Thank you for hopping on again. I really appreciate it.
I was so flattered you asked me.
Yeah, well, you just by like obviously I don't know the intricacies of your life, but just seeing it from Instagram, you travel
Mhm.
everywhere. You go to you do different things within the church, and it's amazing, and it's always cool to see. So that being said, I'm actually curious, and I don't know if you've ever explained it, but what is the story behind your username here?
So Exxon on the Run. I when I left the convent, I just celebrated my 3-year convent exit anniversary.
Mm.
Shortly after I left, I had no idea what to do with my life. I entered super young, and when I came back to the world, didn't have a bank account, didn't have had never had a real adult job in the world or anything. And a friend suggested that I just start doing things that I would have never been able to do as a sister. And the first thing that came to mind for me was to walk the Camino de Santiago.
Mm.
which if you haven't heard of it, it's a pilgrimage walk across the north of Spain.
Mm.
And so I ended up walking it, I want to say like 5 weeks after I left religious life. And while on the Camino, I met two CFRs, Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, and a friend of theirs who's a deacon. Not a CFR, but is a deacon. And as we got to know each other, we, shared my story of how I had just left religious life and then began to share it with other pilgrims as well. And they started calling us the two friars, a deacon, and ex-nun on the run. And one of the reasons I did the Camino was really I wanted to give thanks for my vocation, for the 8 years that I had in religious life, because it was so, I would not be who I am today, doing all the things that I get to do today if it had not been for my experiences in religious life. And people are like, well, what are you running from? And I'm like, it's not running from anything, but it's running to, and running to heaven, essentially. So Santiago, or if you ever have walked the Camino, and if you haven't, I highly recommend it. But when you arrive in Santiago, it's what I imagine heaven to be, with the pilgrims, so the saints who have gone before you, like greeting you in the square in front of the piazza, and complete strangers you've never met in your life, but have been praying for you along the way, or you may have encountered them at one point, but it's just this like huge reunion with complete strangers. And so I kind of liken it to that, and it stuck. I thought it was fun. But some people are like, well, what happens when you like get married? What, are you going to change it? Or, I'm like, well, find me a husband first, then we'll talk.
Even then, I feel like the name, because you're still an ex-nun, like,
Mm-hmm.
even
Yeah,
if
I
you
love it.
happen to. So yeah, I think you should stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
Really
It's
cool.
a great conversation starter. And a lot of people think that since, they're under this impression that if you leave the convent, you somehow hate the church or don't want to be Catholic anymore. So it's always a shock to them when they see that I very much still love the church, love being Catholic, love to promote vocations. Yeah. So.
You mention that, and I laugh at that because that was literally me. Because like when I first started on here, and I'm like, oh, ex-nun on the run. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
she left because as a guy, I have no idea what the order system is like within sisters or nuns. I'm so ignorant on it, and I probably shouldn't be. But as soon as I saw, I'm like, oh, ooh, she's probably like anti-Catholic now or something.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people think that. Somebody actually advised me when I first got on Instagram, a complete stranger. He was like, you should change your Instagram handle because it's going to give people the wrong impression. I'm like, A, who are you? And then B, let them think the wrong impression and stick along. And then they can see what, like who I am, what I'm about, etc.
Hey, you don't know me, but here's some advice. Like, what? Who does that? So
who does that?
Typical Instagram.
Classic.
Anyways, so if you're just hopping on now, we're going to be talking about how we can bring reverence back to our mass and effectively our parish. So really to kind of be on the same page, so everyone understands what a reverent mass is, because I feel like someone usually messages me once a week asking me like, hey, I saw that reel. What is reverent mass? Like I just lined it out in that reel, but okay. So what would you say would be your textbook definition of a reverent mass?
Textbook definition? Well, I always go back to like, what does reverence even mean? I love Latin, studied Latin for years, and the word reverence in a nutshell means to stand in awe of. And at the Mass, we stand in awe of God, and all of our attention should be focused towards worshiping and honoring him with every fiber of our being. The liturgy is not about me. Right. It's not about my preferences. But yeah, so that's, essentially what I feel like a reverent mass is just this complete honor and worship of God.
Okay. And so that's like really good, because I never really thought the meaning behind reverence.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
It comes from the Latin reverere. So the re is means to go back. So almost to go back to origin. So we're going back to our origin, literally, when we are at Mass. And then the verere is just to stand in awe of.
That's what, and it just reminds me of just like the English language in general, how words can change their meaning. Because when I think of before you even mentioned it, before I thought of reverence, that didn't even occur to me. So it's just funny how that works.
And when we stand before, whom we love, like when you think about like, if I love this person so much and I want them to know that I love them and I honor them, like how do we do that? How is our posture? How is, like everything in that liturgy needs to be directed towards the Lord. So whether it's from the priest celebrating the Mass and then those of us assisting in the liturgy as well.
Why do you think it's important? Why do you think reverence is important to the Mass?
Because if it's without the reverence, then it's like, why are you even there? Who are you there for?
Yeah.
Why are you there? And it brings to mind so much of, when Jesus says in the New Testament, like when they ask you, have a reason to be ready, to be ready to respond. And that to me is like the essence of why we are reverent at Mass.
Totally. I'm always kind of shocked to see people that really just go because they just go. It's like their tradition is to go either on every Sunday or they have the Creasters. And it's like, I hate to say, like, just don't go. But, or just like, go ahead.
Yes. Or when I hear, that the percentage of Catholics that don't believe in the real presence of the Eucharist is astounding to me. But then I think, well, how many times have I taken it for granted? How many times have I forgotten that that's not truly the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus that I'm receiving, that I'm allowing to dwell inside of me, that he's allowing himself to dwell inside of me, that I forget that because, we go to daily Mass, and it wasn't really until the pandemic that when it was taken from us, when the liturgy was taken from us, that I was like, oh my goodness, it was a real wake-up call. And I think it was a real wake-up call for so many people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was a wake-up call for me because like many, we just didn't have access to parishes that, were open. And even then, I do think that one of maybe, silver lining would be that, and they almost kind of see it today now, more and more people have seen Masses being streamed that are amazing Masses, reverent Masses.
Yes.
It's like, oh, what is this? This is different. And so I think as we start to see more and more, we're seeing people wake up or do kind of the Great Catholic Awakening, which has been, tremendous for me just to see when it comes to those Masses that are streamed. And then you also see the Masses that probably shouldn't be streamed. Also get highlighted, and it's good.
The concerts, the shows.
The almost NSL sketch like
performance.
I won't name names, but
I know. Poor Jesus.
Yeah. So how do you think we got to this point where we go to a Mass and it's just not treated the way it should be? Like, where do you think how we got there?
I mean, I think it's important to remember that this has always existed, like the lack of reverence at the Mass, even pre-Vatican II, was there, where the liturgy wasn't celebrated the way it's written out in the rite, or the Blessed Sacrament is disrespected and dishonored. So I think it's important for us to remember that, so that we know to work towards bringing about reverence as well. But I think it comes from a variety of things. One being people don't understand what's happening, so they either haven't been taught. But I don't take that as an excuse, because we have the internet and this little 13-inch phone, so do your research about what the liturgy is. All the church documents are free and available to read. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask your priest, ask people that you think might know. So there's that. But then, I think a lot of it is a lot of misunderstanding of what's happening at the liturgy. A lot of it, there's always this talk, I feel like, of, well, I don't go to that Mass because I don't like I don't like how this such and such is done. You know, they're too traditional there, or father is too strict there, or what, you know, like all these reasons of like making the liturgy preferential for me when it's not, the liturgy is not about you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a lot of that too that we hear. And I've done it too. Like somebody DM'd me the other day and was like, I wish we didn't have to church shop. And I was like, I wish we didn't have to either. I wish I could just walk into any church and know the liturgy here is going to be celebrated beautifully and reverently, you know? But when it's not, of course, we're going to seek out something better.
Oh.
Yeah. But I don't think it's cause to be hopeless, to feel like, oh my goodness, the liturgy is being celebrated so irreverently at so many places. Like, I think the fact that we're waking up to this, that these conversations are happening, that people are seeking out beautiful, reverent liturgies should be a sign of hope for many people.
Definitely. And I totally agree with you. I've been guilty of being very vocal about my annoyances about certain, masses. And it's like, I shouldn't do that, because I should be happy that I have easy access to the sacraments. Mm-hmm. Whereas people in Afghanistan, they probably don't.
Yeah, they don't.
Or just in any other third world country that might be having difficulties with that. So I always have to remind myself.
In your defense, though, I can see how that is valid, because if you see something at the Mass that should not be happening, then that should definitely be a grievance.
Yeah.
So for example, I went to a Mass in Loyola, Spain, in the very room where St. Ignatius had his conversion. And I just remember being like, whenever I get to have Mass at these places, I'm just like in awe that, this major thing happened in this saint's life, and that, has made such an impact in the life of the church today. And so was so excited that I was invited to go to this Mass, and then a woman read the gospel. And that was like one of many things that took place during that liturgy. But I just was like mortified, And I was newly out of the convent. This was right before I walked the Camino. So I thought, is this what's happened to the liturgy in the world now? Yeah. So there are things that, you don't need to be a theologian. You don't need to be a liturgy expert to know that it's not right. Yeah. And thanks be to God, we're not like in Afghanistan or North Korea, where we do have the liturgy readily available to us. But that also doesn't mean that you just let these things that are wrong and happening during the liturgy go.
Yeah. And I think an issue with that, and I'm guilty of this, by the way, is that I see something and I'm like, I'm never coming here again. And I don't address it to the actual priest, which I should definitely do it, because
you should.
You think anybody else is going to be doing that? No.
Exactly.
No. So I think, standing ground and just charitably talking to the priest, difficult to do in the moment, I know. But that's something that I've struggled with in the past.
You should talk to the priest.
Yeah.
Or call me and I'll do it.
Yeah, I'll just have you do the dirty work, Marilis. I'll just.
I don't mind.
Okay, well, talking on the same subject, majority of U.S. Catholics don't have access to what we would call maybe like the traditional, or at least a reverent Novus Ordo Mass, or even literally a traditional Latin Mass. So we're kind of like left up, if those that do not have access to those types of parishes, what can a simple layperson do when it comes to that? Like, how do we bring reverence to the Mass?
So I think at first, like, whatever it is you think that's happening that shouldn't be happening, do some research so that it's not just like, I don't like that song, or I don't like the music being played. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's something there's a difference between that to, they're changing the words in the right.
Yeah.
so really know what you're talking about. But
Yeah.
then B, do go talk to Father, either approach him after Mass if he doesn't look like he's in the middle of, talking to a bunch of other people or in the middle of something, or ask to meet with him privately. Like, I wouldn't advise that you call him out publicly by any means. And then just have a conversation about it, and not in like an accusatory way, but just say, hey, Father, I noticed that this happened at the liturgy, and I just have some concerns, or I just wanted to ask you about it, and then go from there,
Yeah.
But there's definitely a way of approaching a situation to hopefully make those changes. I saw somebody say in the comments that they've written emails to their diocese about when they see, that could be a way of handling things too. But I always say just to talk to Father first before going straight to your diocese,
I've done something similar where I've written, well, I didn't write the bishop because I don't have his email address. I just have his administrator's email address, and I never got a response. So it's like, address the actual priest that's having the thing be done. And then
For
if
sure.
in some sense they're completely just avoiding you and addressing the situation, then I think you'd have to find a way to talk to
right. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being persistent either. Like,
sure.
I mean, today is St. Catherine of Siena's feast day, and I think she's a great example of one who was persistent. I mean, it was straight to the Holy Father, but you know what I mean? Like, she spoke the truth to the Pope. And so I think sometimes we as lay people need to do that with the clergy, especially when it comes to the liturgy.
Especially, yeah. Well, cool. Well, we're going to take some questions now. So I know we just had that one. Let me see if there's any that I can pull up. Because I was going to do a screen share. I don't know if I can screen share when there's someone on here.
I don't know what that means.
Oh, well, I can share my screen because I was going to share because I did like a question on one of my
stories. That's right.
And if I'm doing the solo, I can do it, but I don't see the option to do that. So I may just have to, because I knew something like this would probably happen. So I have to go.
You can just read them.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. So the first question would be, well, this misspelled something here. What can you do to reset your mind at Mass when it begins to wander?
Oh, so what I do is I just close my eyes and I say a quick prayer to my guardian angel to help me refocus. And then not dwell on getting distracted. So I think often we'll get distracted, and it's like you give yourself a hard time for getting distracted rather than refocusing on the liturgy. So don't do that. Stay, close your eyes, be like, guardian angel, help me refocus, and then just like recenter yourself in whatever's happening in that moment.
Good tip. I usually just get angry and just stare at people, give them dirty looks. Or I'll just like sigh audibly. No, I'm just kidding. I don't do that. So here's another question. My girlfriend wanted to become a nun, and I love her so much. Any tips for her and myself?
If your girlfriend is seriously just considering religious life, you need to break up. You cannot seriously discern a vocation if you're also discerning another vocation. So I would hope and assume that you're dating to discern marriage. You can't discern marriage while also discerning a vocation to religious life. And though that would be, I can't imagine how heartbreaking that is. I wasn't in that position, but I know many who have been. Mm-hmm. But it kind of needs to happen. if she really is feeling that call to discern religious life, and then give that time to discerning it well. And if she is, wherever God is calling her, and trust that if that needs to happen, that the Lord has a plan for this man as well,
Yeah. No,
But you
that's great.
can't be like dating and think, oh, am I supposed to be a sister or am I supposed to be a priest? Like, it doesn't work like that.
You mean you can't date while someone's in is it the nun? I don't want to
The
say something.
convent,
The
the convent.
convent, yeah.
Mm-mm.
They can't do. Okay, okay. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Mm-hmm. I would
Um,
have, when I was a sister and I went back to school as a sister, I'd have these girls who would be like practically engaged, or, close to engagement in these serious relationships with these young men. And they'd be like, wait, was I supposed to discern religious life?
hey,
I'd be like, well, have you ever thought about it? No. And I was like, you're okay. You
that's a
don't need
funny
to have
thing.
these existential vocational crises every time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. It's funny because like I think back to my education. I went to Catholic school from first grade to high school, and I don't recall or remember any sort of like, hey, have you thought about vocational life to maybe the priesthood? Never once came in conversation, which is like crazy. Like you'd think at a Catholic school there'd be some sort of like, hey guys, should maybe think about looking into that instead of not. So I can understand some people getting like, I don't know what to do. I'm
Yeah.
feeling call. I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
But if that call, I do advise people, like, if that call is persistent and there's this like you're drawn to the idea. For myself personally, I was both drawn and terrified of the idea. So
sure.
all my discernment, before, even in the beginning of when I was visiting convents, I did very secretly. I didn't tell my friends about it. I didn't tell my family about it. I told just my confessor and spiritual director about it. It was a very personal thing, but it was one of those things. It was because I was afraid of the answer.
Yeah.
And but if it's something that persists, you have to really look into that and pray about that and discern it with Jesus and somebody that you trust to guide you in that spiritual interior form.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We got another one. Okay. Any tips for young adults 20 to 30 that want fellowship with other young adults but have none at their parish?
I would say seek out, there might not be any in your parish, but there might be some in your diocese. And if there aren't any in your parish, you could start something at your parish. We don't need to wait for other people to do it. Yeah, I found there's a beautiful community here in DC, and it was through the diocese, going to these events, which I dreaded, but I would go to these young adult events that the diocese would host, or different parishes, not necessarily mine, but different parishes in the diocese would host. And that's how I was able to meet my now friends.
Nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough out there for young Catholics, and I think you're absolutely right. If there's nothing out there, then maybe that's because you need to do it. Maybe, and I'm not saying you, Marilis, I'm saying
Yeah.
you, the person that's having this struggle.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Here we go. When you enter into the convent, is there a way to distinguish God's intended versus his permissible will?
Ooh. Yes, this isn't discerned by yourself though. So the beautiful thing about religious life is it's discerned with the community that you're entering. So there's, there's different levels of formation. You don't enter and it's like you're making final vows tomorrow. And so within those different levels of formation, there are guides, so sisters that are assigned to guide you during that time.
Nice.
And you just have to be very transparent and honest with whatever is happening in whatever's happening interiorly, but then your own personal experiences too, so that the community can help you discern that God's will. And sometimes it can come from on their end, where they say this isn't for you. And I think that's a pretty clear-cut way of discerning that, of you getting an answer, if it's God's will or not.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the wisdom of the church is so apparent in religious life.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll do one more question. Veil or no veil?
Veil. I veil. I think it's a beautiful practice that women get to do, have the privilege of doing. I'm not like, if you don't veil, you heathen, but no, it's a beautiful, I think it's a beautiful practice and a beautiful way for us for women, specifically, to show reverence. I think, there's interior reverence, but so much of reverence too is what's happening exteriorly. How is my posture at Mass? How am I dressed at Mass? And, you might say these are minor things, but they all contribute to who we are honoring at the liturgy. So I'm definitely team veil. I feel like a lot of women are apprehensive about veiling because they feel like people are staring at them, or, people will judge them about it. But I'm like, well, who are you trying to please at Mass? Who are you veiling for?
Speaking of that, because I've seen people, because I think I did something with veiling. I can't remember exactly what it was, and people were like asking me, what is the purpose behind veil? Like, what is the main purpose behind veiling? And I'm like, well, it's like, we veil anything that's beautiful and sacred,
Mm-hmm.
like the Eucharist, women, and that wasn't a good enough answer.
The tabernacle, yeah.
Right.
No, and it's, it really comes from just that. Those are the three life-bearing things inside the church.
There it is.
And Our Lady, it's, an imitation of her who veils. Yeah.
What about men veiling? I'm just kidding. I don't want to get into that. Well, hey, I think this is a pretty good juncture here to kind of close things out. I really appreciate, your time here, Marilis. I know it's kind of late. Yeah, no, it was fun. We should do this again.
Yes, please. I need to have you like a Musings with Mayor episode.
Yes, sign me up. Where do I sign up? Because I'll do.
I don't know.
Do it.
Haven't had time to do one in a while.
Well, there we go. We have our first one back from the time that you haven't done it. So we'll have to figure that. We'll have to put something on the calendar. But yeah, if you're just jumping in now, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Now, but I'll definitely post it so you can watch it. Thanks again, Marilis, and I hope everyone has a great and beautiful Friday and weekend.
Thank you. Have a great Friday, everybody. Bye.
Bye.